All right, Mr. Ahmed here for 9.2 part 1. Goal for today is going to be to work with our first special right triangle, which is a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. And a couple things about a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. We know that it has two congruent angles. They're both 45 degrees, and they are opposite of the legs. Now, since these two angles are congruent, that means that the two legs are also congruent. So the two legs are the same size. All right, and we also have our right angle to ensure that it's a right triangle. So there's a couple ways you could see these in a diagram. You could just see a 45, 45, 90 drawn something like this, showing that the two legs are congruent and that these is a right angle. So that ensures me it's a right triangle. Since these legs are congruent, I would know it's a 45, 45, 90. Another way that I could see it is I could see a right triangle drawn like this, and it'll just mark these two angles as congruent. So since those two angles are congruent, I would know that these two legs are congruent and that these two angles have to be 45 degrees. So a couple of reasons why I know that. All the angles add up to 180. If this one's 90, 180 minus 90 is 90. Divide 90 by 2, I get 45 and 45. So it's an isosceles triangle. It has two congruent angles. It has two congruent sides. The key here is, in order to find some missing side lengths, we can use this formula. The hypotenuse. Keep in mind the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. The hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. So the way this is kind of set up, we write this out a couple ways. These two legs are both x, so the hypotenuse is equal to x times the square root of 2, whatever this length is. We can also write it out verbally by saying the hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. Using that, we can find the hypotenuse, or we can find the leg if we know one or the other. So first example says find the value of x. So the first thing I want to do is identify what type of triangle is it. Well, it's 90, it's 45, so that means the other angle also has to be 45, so it's a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. I'm going to write out the equation. The hypotenuse, HYP, equals the leg times the square root of 2. In this case, 8 is a leg, x is the hypotenuse. So if I substitute these values into the formula, I'm looking for the hypotenuse. That's x equals the leg, which is 8 times the square root of 2. And we're going to leave this in simplest form. And we're talking simplest radical form, so we're good to go. 8 times the square root of 2 is our solution. Next one. Well, we're supposed to find x. Couple things here. What type of triangle is it? This is a right angle. These two sides are both labeled as x. I didn't really mark that out here. But just like these were the same size, this would be an x and an x. So I could just see it drawn like so with an x and an x. Okay, that indicates to me it's a 45, 45, 90 right triangle as well, because it is isosceles and it is right. So this is 45 and 45. So we have a leg. The legs are the same size, and this is the hypotenuse. So following the formula, the hypotenuse equals leg times root 2. Putting in what I know, the hypotenuse is 5 times the square root of 2. That's equal to the leg x times the square root of 2. For us to solve, I divide both sides by the square root of 2. This is just a decimal, okay? Anything divided by itself cancels. Do it to one side, have to do it to the other. In this case, these both cancel, bam, bam, and I'm left with x equals 5, which kind of makes sense. If I were to backtrack, if the leg is 5, the hypotenuse is 5 times the square root of 2. Okay, so we left it in exact form. All righty. On to a couple more. This time I have the perimeter of a square being 48 meters. Find the length of a diagonal. So I'm going to draw out a square here. And if I'm told the perimeter of this square is 48, I'm finding this piece. These are congruent. This is a right angle because it's a square. I'm looking for this piece x. Perimeter equals 48. So each side would be 48 divided by 4. Whoops. I got 12. This is 12 and 12. So for us to find this piece, that is the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. That 12 is a leg. So x equals 12 times the square root of 2. We will leave it in that form. If you have to get a decimal, you could just type it into your calculator. When you type it into your calculator, 12 second square root, I have to use the square root button. 2, enter. Notice mine does not give me a decimal. I need to push this little button here at the bottom with the 2 arrows to convert it to a decimal. And I got 16.97, so about 17. Okay? This time, the perimeter of the square is 20, so we're supposed to find the length of a diagonal again. So again, since it's a square, we have a right angle. The diagonal is going across. That is the hypotenuse x. And the perimeter is equal to 20. So for me to find each side, I would take 20 divided by 4, which is 5, 5, 5, and 5. So the hypotenuse x equals the leg. I'm not writing it out this time. Hypotenuse x equals leg, which is 5 times the square root of 2. We got it. So that is our procedure. Some extra practice here. I'm going to do the first 4. Then there's a whole nother page, okay? Now I'm going to go through this whole situation on the video, but I recommend after these first 4, you hit pause and practice some on your own, okay? So 45, 45, 90. Leg is 5. Y is also equal to 5 because that is the other leg. Now for us to find x, we have to take the leg times the square root of 2 because that is the hypotenuse. So x equals leg, which is 5 times the square root of 2. I'm just going to write down the formula once up at the top. Hypotenuse equals leg times square root 2. Hopefully you have that memorized here after a little while. All right. 8 times the square root of 2, that appears to be a leg, so y is also equal to 8 times the square root of 2. Now to find x, that is the hypotenuse across from the right angle. So x equals leg, 8 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Okay, so I had this leg times square root 2. That's equal to the hypotenuse. So when I simplify this down, I have to multiply these radicals together. So I'd have 8 times the square root of 4 equals x. Now I can take the square root of 4 because that's a whole number. So I'd have 8 times the square root of 4 is 2, and 8 times 2 is 16. Okay. On to the next one. 45, 45, 90, 7. Y is also 7. The hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2, so our leg is 7. So x is equal to 7 times the square root of 2. Kind of picking up the pace here a little bit. 14, b is 14. Hey, that's the hypotenuse. Equals the leg, 14 times the square root of 2. We got it. Leave it in radical form. So, I recommend hitting pause. Try these next few on your own, and then we'll do the bottom part together. All right. Hopefully you had some success. I'm going to kind of fly through this here a little bit. We have a leg and a leg. So y is equal to 10 times the square root of 2. Those are the 2 legs. The hypotenuse x is equal to 10 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Multiply those together. That's 10 times the square root of 4, which is 10 times 2. X is equal to 20. And we found our 2 values. Next one, this time it gave us the hypotenuse. So I'm going to write down this formula again. Hypotenuse equals leg times square root 2. So this time, this is the hypotenuse, and we're finding a leg. Now these are both going to be the same. So once I find A, I will know B. So the hypotenuse is 9 times the square root of 2 equals the leg A times the square root of 2. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. Cancels, 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 cancels. A is equal to 9. B is also equal to 9. We got it. All right. Next one. 12 times the square root of 2. So the hypotenuse equals leg times square root of 2. In this case, the hypotenuse is 12 times the square root of 2. That equals the leg. We'll call that x times the square root of 2. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. Again, they cancel. So x is equal to 12, and y is also equal to 12. Those are the same size. They're both legs. So hopefully after a little while here, you kind of start catching on to this. So this is the hypotenuse. Now for us to end up with 15 times the square root of 2, what did I have to start with? I had to start with 15 because the hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. So we should hopefully recognize that x is 15 and y is 15. If not, we could still set up the equation. Okay, so I'll set up the equation here just to be safe. 15 root 2 equals x times the square root of 2. Divide both sides. And I get x to equal 15. And y is also equal to 15. Those are the same size. All right. Number 9. A little bit trickier this time. Here I am told that the hypotenuse is 2. So again, the hypotenuse 2 is equal to the leg x times the square root of 2. Now for us to solve this one, I divide both sides by the square root of 2, and this is where things get tricky. I cannot leave a square root in the denominator. There's no radicals allowed in the abasement. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rationalize the denominator. And in order to rationalize the denominator, we multiply by whatever it is that's down there. So right now I have a square root of 2. So I'm going to take 2 over the square root of 2. That's what's down there. I need to multiply by itself, which is the square root of 2. If I do that to the bottom, I also have to do that to the top. So on the top, I get 2 times the square root of 2. Now on the bottom, I get the square root of 4. 2 times 2. And what happens here? We can take the square root of 4, and we get 2 times the square root of 2 over 2. Our 2's cancel, and I'm left with the square root of 2. So x is equal to the square root of 2, and y is also equal to the square root of 2. So we had to rationalize the denominator. Okay, we'll see a couple of those. I'm going to do another one on number 15. Alrighty, next one, 4 root 2 for a leg. That means n is also equal to 4 times the square root of 2. And now m, that is equal to 4 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. So that's 4 times the square root of 4. That's 4 times 2, which is 8. And we got both. Oop, a little bit off the screen. So n is equal to 4 times the square root of 2. M is equal to the square root of 8. All right. V, leg and leg. 6 times the square root of 2 there. Now to find the hypotenuse, u equals the leg, which is 6 root 2 times the square root of 2. That's 6 times the square root of 4. 6 times 2 is 12. Make sure after you take the square root, you get rid of the square root sign. On this one, working backwards, this is the hypotenuse again. This is a leg. So the hypotenuse, 18 root 2 equals the leg y times the square root of 2, or you could have used x, doesn't make a difference. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. Y is equal to 18. And x is also equal to 18. We got them. All right, rationalize the denominator on this one again. So 15, that's the hypotenuse. So 15 equals the leg x times the square root of 2. So again, I got to divide both sides by the square root of 2. Cancels on the right. Can't leave a radical in the basement. So I have to take 15 times the square root of 2 because I'm doing it to both the top and the bottom. Whatever's in the denominator, we multiply by itself. If I do it to the bottom, I also have to do it to the top. Now, that's equal to 15 times the square root of 2 over 2 times 2. That's the square root of 4. And we can simplify that down just a little bit further to 15 times the square root of 2 over 2. And that is equal to x. And that is also equal to y. They're the same size. We got it. Same process here for number 14. We're going to have to rationalize the denominator. Hypotenuse 20 equals the leg v times the square root of 2. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. Can't leave a radical in the basement. So I multiply by whatever it is that's down there. We have to take the square root of 2 times itself, which is the square root of 2. Do it to the bottom, also have to do it to the top. Now, 20 times the square root of 2 over square root of 4. I'm going to do that in one step this time. The square root of 4 is 2. Now this time I can go slightly further. 20 divided by 2 reduces down to 10. So that's 10 times the square root of 2. And that is equal to u, and v is also equal to 10 times the square root of 2. They are the same size. And we got it. All right. On number 15, one more time here, rationalize the denominator. 9 equals x times the square root of 2. That's the hypotenuse, leg, and leg. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. We have a radical in the basement. He can't be there. So we have to rationalize the denominator. Multiply by whatever's down there. It's the square root of 2. 9 times the square root of 2 on top. This is going to turn into the square root of 4, which is 2. And that is equal to both x, and it's also equal to y. And you cannot take that any further. 9 over 2 does not reduce. And the last one, v is also equal to 9 times the square root of 2, and u equals 9 root 2 times root 2. The leg times root 2 is equal to the hypotenuse. That's the square root of 4 again. The square root of 4 is 2, so that is equal to 18. And we have our 2 solutions. That's all she wrote for today. Have a good one.